Hello, hello. Good morning or good afternoon. Welcome. Welcome to Interview Prep 101. As you filter in to the webinar, please tell us where you're tuning in from. I'd love to hear um, anything you want to share about what you're wanting to get out of the webinar today as well. I'm tuning in from Portland, Oregon. We have had some amazing weather this month, but it has turned and the rain is back. So trying to be okay with that. We'll give it a few minutes here. Hi, Christine. Thank you for being here. Southeast Connecticut. That is definitely on the other side of the world from me. We'll give it another minute or so. Hi, Danielle. South Jersey near Philadelphia. That's awesome. Hi, Shityal. You're tuning in from North Carolina. A lot of East Coast today. So as we are filtering in here, I'd love to know one word you'd use to describe how you feel about interview, about going to an interview, about the interview process. I'd love to know one word that describes what that feels like to you. Texas is 100 degrees. Oh my goodness. I guess I shouldn't complain so much about the rainy day we're having here. Opportunity, nervous, overwhelming, anxious. Yes, yes. Those are great words, very common words. Okay, well, as folks continue to filter in, feel free to add into the chat where you're tuning in from, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. So again, welcome. My name is Felicia Royce. I'm the Director of Alumni and Career Services, and I'm joined today by Catherine Swery. She is going to be in the background, just making sure everything is working with our technology, and she's going to be monitoring the chat here and there as well. So our agenda today is really pretty simple. You will notice that your line has been muted, and that's just because we do record this and we do send this out as an email as well. So you should get a recording of this, and anyone who's not able to be here in person today will also get a recording. That being said, I love engagement. I love questions. I love comments. So feel free as we go through this information to be engaging in the chat. So we're going to talk about some interview strategies, some tips, some examples, and just, really dive into how to really prepare in the best way possible for your opportunities. So you've been applying for jobs for months, and you finally get the email that says, we would like to interview you. And a flood of emotions come in, relief, excitement, nerves, as we saw here in the chat. And I just want to start by saying, if you've made it to the interview process, you're already so far down the line, right? You've made it through application tracking systems. You've made it through, a competitive job market. A human has actually read your resume and is interested in your background and what you have to offer. So we'll just start there that, you're already so far down the line. And so now it's just about getting prepared and really kind of putting your best foot forward. So how do we do that? First of all, it's important to really know what the environment's going to look like. So is this virtual? Is it in person? Is it just one person interviewing you? Is it a panel interview? If that information is not clear, it is totally okay for you to ask. for that information. Most of the time, it is all there in the email that they send to you. But make sure you confirm, that you are going to, be attending in whatever environment they're asking you to attend. And keep in mind as are thinking about, you know, oh, I'm excited and I really hope that I'm the best candidate. The interviewer really wants to hire you. At the end of the day, they have a problem that they need to solve. They need somebody in a role. They need the support. And so putting your best foot forward, just realizing that they've already seen your resume and they're already interested. So this is just a chance for you to really shine and show your personality and really articulate why you're a good fit for the role. So you're going to hear me say this quite a few times in this webinar, but I think one of the most important things to do is to research the organization's mission, values, and services and really understand that backwards and forwards. Googling the company and getting a sense of, what their website looks like, what they list as their mission, what other employees do they have working there? Are they a small company? Are they a big company? And what what is their service? What do they sell, so to speak, right? And is there a way for you to engage with that service before you actually, go to the interview to get a sense of what you would be doing in that role? So using LinkedIn is a really good way to start, kind of seeing, other employees that work at that organization. And also, I promise you, this is totally not creepy. It is totally okay to research the interviewer and to go to their page on LinkedIn and get a sense of their background, how long they've been with the company, what other roles maybe they've been in. And really, maybe there's something you have in common that you can bring into the interview as a connection point. So totally okay to do your research. In fact, I think most employers and interviewers really appreciate that. The other thing you can use, and I do give the caveat to use this with caution, you can use Glassdoor. Glassdoor has a lot of reviews from employees, and they do have an interview. So if you go to Glassdoor and type in the company, you'll see other people who've interviewed there will give their feedback on maybe the structure of the interview. And I say be careful with that because everyone's going to have their own experience and you don't really want to go in with a lot of bias. Or if somebody had a bad experience, you don't really want to take that energy into the interview. So, but it's a good way to kind of get a sense of what this structure is going to look like. Is it going to be more behavioral based questions? Is it going to be more laid back? Every interview is a little bit different. Some interviews are really formal. They ask the same questions to every candidate, and some are really conversational and there's a lot of back and forth. So it's good to try to be prepared for either one. And then really rereading the job description, I'd say a couple of times, and really getting clear on what you would be doing in this role. And really in your answers that they're asking you, tie your language around what they're asking for, what your responsibilities would be in that role. So use those keywords that they put on their job description. It's also helpful to do that if you feel stuck. If you're like, oh, I'm kind of blanking, just remembering the job description and, oh, they really want somebody who has excellent customer service. And when I worked, at Starbucks, I had to exemplify excellent customer service. I'm going to use as an example. So really kind of matching up those skills and really understanding the role. Are you going to be doing administrative work? Are you going to be more of an assistant? Is this academic in nature? Are you going to be client facing? What type of environment, what type of vibe is this going to be? And that really helps you figure out, what you're going to wear to your interview. If you're interviewing for a small kind of laid back company, maybe they have 5 employees, and you're not getting a vibe that it's super professional, you might show up, in something a little more dressed down but professional versus if you are, going to interview for, let's say, a corporate position, maybe it's a finance position or something that's more traditional nature. You might think about wearing a blazer or maybe even a suit. So really dressing for the interview and the style and the vibe of the company as well. And then lastly, really knowing the current trends and the news around either that company or the integrative health industry in general. So one way you can do this is just Googling the company again and then going to the news tab in Google, and any news, especially for bigger companies, any news that has come up in the last few years will pop up there. And those are great talking points. And again, showing that you've really done your research. Okay. So it's really a fine line between really being professional and really, being articulate and really being authentic. I have had the opportunity to interview quite a few candidates in my past, and I can always feel when somebody's being inauthentic. I'd rather somebody bring their true self to the interview and really, exemplify who they are, but also be really professional. So, not going on tangents about what you did last weekend or, things that aren't, at all applicable to the role, but really, explaining why this is a passion of yours and really telling a story. So the most important aspect in my mind is communication skills. So it really doesn't matter if you have 10 years of experience in this role that you're interviewing for or no experience. The most important thing is that you're able to articulate why you are the right fit, why you are the candidate they're looking for. So really practicing that, really, thinking about your background and your story and really telling a story, right? I think it's okay to give examples of what led you down to this path. And, really, how what you've done in the background has shaped you to be able to be ready and able to be a professional that they are looking for. So a couple of things. So we've talked about nerves, and nerves are normal. I don't think there's anybody I've ever talked to who goes into an interview and has zero nerves, right? Like that's just not possible. But I think it's important to really practice your confidence, and you can practice your posture and making eye contact. And there's a difference between being a little nervous, but still maintaining that eye contact versus like looking down and, fiddling with your hands. And part of that is also energy level. Sometimes when we're really nervous, we'll kind of talk like this and, we won't really like boldly articulate ourselves because we're nervous. So there's some things you can do, having a glass of water with you and taking a pause if you're feeling those nerves come up. Asking the interviewer to repeat a question, taking a minute, thinking, taking a beat. Silence is okay for a minute. It's okay to take a deep breath or to start over. That is also being authentic. Okay, and then really again, linking to their mission and communicating your why. Why do you align with their mission? Why is this mission important to you? And if it's not important to you and you don't really want to be in that interview, I think, really understanding that too, right? An interview goes both ways. And if you show up to an interview and you're not that jazzed about it, I think that's also going to speak for itself. It's okay to turn down interviews that are not a good fit. I also want to say that. So being articulate, keeping it concise, really sharing both quantitative and qualitative information. So going into a holistic health field, requires a lot of soft skills, which is great because then, if you're a career changer, these are soft skills that could be transferable from other experiences you've had. So things like empathy, working with a team, those types of things. And then also, maybe you came into your last role and you designed a sales model that increased, sales productivity by 30%. So sharing those, those quantitative pieces as well is really important, being able to kind of have both. So how do you prove that you are the right fit? How do you articulate that? And we're going to go over some actual examples of this. Some of you might have heard of this acronym, but STAR is a really good way to prepare. So what is the situation? What was the task? What is the action? And what was the outcome or the result? This is especially a great method to apply to behavioral questions. Highlighting those skills, we just talked about this, really, leaning on those skills, especially if you're a career changer and you've never been in this type of role before. Employers want to know, are you adaptable? Can you communicate clearly? Are you able to handle conflict? And that's what they're kind of testing for. Sometimes in an interview, you can feel like you're on the hot seat because there's pressure put on you for a reason, right? They want to see, what you do under pressure. So really showcasing your certifications. Again, if you're a new graduate and you're going into this new field, really leaning on your education, projects, dissertations, thesis, things that you've done that you're really proud of in your educational experience. And then practice these things out loud. Practice them in the mirror, practice them with a friend, with a coach like myself, and really get comfortable. I want to stop. Any questions at this point? Any comments? Feel free to put anything in the chat that's really resonating with you. Okay. So I wanted to give a few examples of behavioral-based questions and how to answer them. So behavioral-based interview questions are designed to assess how you've handled situations in the past with the assumption that the past behavior is the best predictor of future performance. So you'll often get questions, behavioral-based questions like, tell me about a time you faced a challenge at work. How did you handle it? And, I've heard all sorts of answers to this question. And it's tricky, right? So they're really, the interviewer is really wanting to get a better understanding of, your problem solving, your resilience, your adaptability. So an example of this would be, in my last role as a tutor, I worked with a student who's falling behind on multiple subjects. I needed to create a plan to help them catch up before finals. I customized our sessions focused on high impact areas, and the student improved their grades by 2 full letters and felt more confident by the end of the semester. So again, it's both qualitative and quantitative in nature. It's very succinct, it's to the point. And so what I would say is, think about this question's often asked, right? So it's a very common question or variations of it. I would come up with a couple of STAR examples and just practice those so that you have something kind of on the ready for this type of question. And then another question that you get often is describe a time you had a conflict with a coworker or team member. I've heard a lot of answers to this question as well that maybe weren't the best. We don't want to, talk about a previous coworker in a negative light or a previous boss. We don't want to, lean on things like gossip or, I just stopped talking to this person, or we really want to, exemplify how we used our skills to be able to deal with conflict. And so you want to try to stay as neutral and professional as possible. So-and-so didn't do their work, so I had to do more work. And so I just took on all of the work myself because they weren't doing their job. Like that would not be a good answer, right? So the situation would be, while I was working as a barista, a coworker and I disagreed on how to prioritize drink orders. We needed to find a way to work together efficiently. I initiated a calm conversation after the shift and acknowledged their perspective, and we agreed on a system. The result is that our workflow improved and our relationship became more collaborative. So you can kind of see how that's a much better way to articulate how to deal with conflict on the job. They can be very tricky, Lauren, very tricky. And these are very common questions that I would say 99% of employers ask. So it's good to just get really comfortable with answering these types of questions. And lastly, for behavioral based, one that comes up a lot is tell me about a time you had to communicate something difficult. So the purpose of this is really looking at your emotional intelligence, your professionalism. Are you diplomatic in these situations? So the situation would be as a wellness coach, I had a client who was resistant to changing dietary habits that was ultimately harming their health. I needed to help them see the impact without being judgmental. So I used motivational interviewing and I asked reflective questions to guide them to their own insight. The result is that they became more open to gradual changes and eventually adopted healthier habits. So you could elaborate a little bit more on that if you wanted to, give a little more examples on that result piece, but you get the idea. So you've had this glorious interview and you're so excited for it to be over because you're so nervous inside. And you've made it, you're half an hour to an hour and you've channeled, all of your questions and they ask you, what questions do you have? And the answer is never, I do not have any questions. You always want to come prepared with specific questions. And they can, generally be about a myriad of things. And really keeping in mind that this is an interview for you as well. This goes both ways. So instead of just asking questions to ask, I'd really deeply think about what do I want to know about this role? What is going to be expected of me? What is the culture on this team I'm going to be working on? And really think about some really, clear questions that is also going to help you decide if this is going to be a good fit for you as well. And I would say you want to keep your questions down to about 2 or 3. You don't want to ask a half an hour worth of questions. And the other tricky thing is, I don't necessarily think this is the best time to talk about salary. I get that question a lot. There's always room for negotiation when you receive your job offer. And that's a time to really negotiate salary. If they don't list their salary range, I think it's appropriate to say, what is the salary range for this position? But I wouldn't try to negotiate that during the interview. I also wouldn't ask just a ton of questions about how much vacation are you going to give me? And, all of those things are important and you will have a chance to negotiate that when they offer you the position. But I think there's a time and a place for that. It's really important to reaffirm your interest in your role and express your gratitude. Again, maybe tie in a few more things at the end about just why you're a good fit for this position and why it's really important to you to work for this company. And then the follow-up is really important. You can use LinkedIn, and that's a great way to do it. You can also actually mail a personal thank you note. I think that's a really personal touch. And you can also just send an email, just thanking them for their time. And I was just talking to an employer not very long ago, and they were telling me it was really interesting. They've been interviewing a lot for some positions, and they barely got anyone thanking them or following up with them at all after the interview. So it's really important, and they are hoping to get that communication from you as well. Lauren said, one time I asked, do you think I'm a good fit at the end? And the interviewer was shocked I asked the question. I had to research the question. Yes, actually, if you are brave enough to ask this question, and you can ask it in a couple of different ways, right? Is there anything that you think is missing, for me to be a good fit for this role? Those types of questions, I think, are actually really brilliant. And it does allow you to kind of understand their thought process. But for some, it does take them off guard. I'm really glad that you asked that. I'm curious, Lauren, if you're willing to share what was that like? Like when you asked that, what kind of response did you get? I would love to hear your feedback on that. Okay. So to give a little more example about how you might articulate or communicate some of the most common interview questions. The one that most interviewers start with is tell me about yourself. This does not mean tell me about your favorite hobbies, your favorite foods, what Starbucks drink you got that morning, your zodiac sign. Like this is truly about tell me about yourself in relation to this role, right? So here I wrote an example. I'm a professional with a strong background in customer service and sales, where I developed strong skills in, you know, input your transferable skill there. Over time, I felt called to pursue a more meaningful path aligned with my passion for integrative health and whole person wellness. This led me to complete training in holistic nutrition, where I deepened my understanding of how to support others through lifestyle, nutrition, and coaching practices. And I'm excited to bring both my professional experience and my passion for holistic health into a role where I can make a real impact in people's lives by helping them feel seen, supported, empowered on their wellness journey. That's a little wordy, and you don't have to be that thorough. Obviously, you don't have to be that scripted. But really, and this, I did create this particular paragraph thinking about a career changer. How do you articulate how you would, be in a role that you've never been in before? And it's really leaning on those transferable skills and your passion. Passion goes a long way. Being hungry to learn something new. Most of the time, you can learn most skills on the job, especially technical skills. But if you have the drive and the motivation and that comes through, even if you don't have exact experience, I think it goes a long way. So Lauren said she was shocked and said yes, but we still have a few people to interview. But overall, I think you're a good fit. It was positive feedback, but I didn't get the first round call back. Yeah, yeah. But at least they let you know that they are interviewing other people. And sometimes it's just nice to get a feel for, their impression, right? So I'm really impressed that you were able to ask that question. It's a good one. Awesome. Another question that you'll get often in an interview is, why do you want to work for this company? And there's a lot of ways you can answer this, right? But again, it goes back to research and alignment with your values and the company's values. So an example of that would be, I'm drawn to your company because of its commitment to holistic and preventative care in the workplace. As somebody passionate about integrative health, I believe supporting employees' physical, mental, and emotional well-being creates lasting positive change in both individual lives and company culture. And then it goes on to talk about the values. You can kind of read that there. This would be for like a corporate wellness job, right? So obviously you need to change this for whatever position you're interviewing for. But it's basically just giving their mission back to them, essentially, right? Like this is what you do, this is what you offer, and this is what I'm excited about. So leaning on the information that you already have and the research that you've done. Okay. This is the hardest question for most people. I would say the close one to that is, what are your greatest strengths, right? Which we're going to talk about in a second. But it's hard, because it's a tricky question, right? Because we want to be honest about what our weaknesses are, but we want to show how we overcome those weaknesses. And I think when we say something like, I'm a perfectionist, I wouldn't recommend using that type of weakness, right? A lot of people say that. It's been heard, it's been said before. I think really talking about like a real thing that you struggle with and how you overcome that, it is important. And I think the authenticity of that comes through. So one of my greatest challenges has been setting energetic boundaries. As a holistic practitioner, I'm highly attuned to others, which is a strength. But early on, I would sometimes take on too much of my client's emotional energy. I've since learned to protect my own energy through grounding practices and clear boundaries. This allows me to stay present and supportive without becoming depleted. and ultimately helps me serve my clients more efficiently. So you can kind of see, and that's true for a lot of people, right? When you're new at something, sometimes the boundaries aren't clear. So, really putting some thought into that weaknesses question and having a good response readily available, I think is really, really important. So then what's my greatest strength? This can actually be a really hard question for people to answer. I think it's actually even more challenging than the weakness question, right? But I think tie it back to what you would need to do in that role and think about what do I do really well that this role is asking for. So in this case, my greatest strength is my ability to deeply listen and hold compassionate, non-judgmental space for others. As a holistic health professional, I understand that true change happens when clients feel safe and supported. I combine that presence with a whole person approach, helping clients make sustainable changes that align with their lifestyle needs. This helps build trust and create meaningful, lasting progress. And again, this is obviously, I'm reading this to you. You'll make it your own and less scripted. But yeah, really leaning on what are some of the strengths that they're asking for that you feel really in alignment with. Okay. And why should we hire you? Which is different than why do you want to work here, right? And I often will have people who are interviewing struggle with this one because sometimes it's hard for people to quote unquote sell themselves, right? Which is essentially what you're doing. But I think, again, thinking about the role that you're interviewing for and feeling confident in those things. Maybe not everything that you'd be doing in this role you know how to do at this point or you feel confident in, but pick out those things that you do and tie it back to that, that research that you've done. So you should hire me because I combine knowledge, a compassionate approach to helping clients create long-lasting changes. My background in psychology and nutrition allows me to support clients physically and emotionally, and I'm skilled at listening deeply and tailoring guidance to each individual's needs. I'm passionate about empowering others and confident I could make a positive impact. Um, and you can elaborate on that as well, and really talk about, the company, what they need and how you can help really solve their problem, right? They need somebody in their sales department. I have 10 years of sales experience. I know I'm confident I can come in and get your sales numbers off the ground, right? You can be pretty elaborate and straightforward and direct about what skills you have based on the problem they're trying to solve, right? So I wouldn't go in and say my strength is that um, I can do 100 push-ups or something that has nothing to do with the role, right? So just again, really tying it to the job description. Sell your skills. That's right, Lauren. I appreciate you commenting there. It's very true. So some additional food for thought. There are some ways to really get prepared for interviews. The most important thing is that you are prepared, right? If it's the first time you are saying some of these things out loud in the interview, you're probably not setting yourself up for success. Just like me preparing for this webinar today, if I would have just come in without practicing, I probably would have been all over the place, right? So really practice and practice, with a human and also like in a mirror. Or one great tactic is to videotape yourself. And see how, your body language and you can learn a lot from that. And then, coaches like me, career services, always happy to help you with mock interviewing and helping you get prepared. Job stars and Muse are some sample questions to get you prepared that you can kind of go through. LinkedIn Toolkit is another great way. I think you can actually say your answers out loud and then get like real time. I think it's AI generated. I'm not quite sure, but you can get some real time feedback on that. I love Amy Cuddy's TED Talk. about mindset. And that's something we didn't really talk about. Mindset is so important, right? Like going in with a confident mindset that I've got this. I could be great at this job. This company wants to hire me is so much different than, oh, I'm so nervous that they're not going to like me and somebody else is going to be better than me and I don't really have experience in this job. And those thoughts are normal, but I think finding ways to build that confidence, whether it's a power pose or listening to something like a TED Talk or practicing and getting real great feedback from your family or friend or your coach that's helping you. But going in with a mindset that I'm a good fit for this position and this is going to go well, it really does go a long way. Um, and then guided meditations, getting grounded, really taking a few minutes to do some deep breathing and root yourself, I think can be really, really helpful as well, especially if you're in the interview and you're feeling yourself ramble or get really nervous or shaky, just closing your eyes, taking a beat can really, really help. Thank you, Christine. So we have just a few more minutes for any other questions or comments, anything else. I mean, you've got me here for as long as needed. If you have any questions about preparing for an interview or anything that's on your mind. So I'll give it a minute here in the chat. And yes, thank you, Catherine, for putting my calendar link in there. Feel free if you want a one-on-one session. It doesn't even have to be about interview preparation. It can be anything career related. Feel free to schedule with me anytime. I really appreciate everybody's engagement today and taking the time. Will I do a Zoom on business development? Yeah, Lauren, I've done quite a few business development, very specific to a specific industry. And I don't know, Catherine, are you able to put the webinar link in the chat? If you go to achs.edu, there's a webinar link that shares all of our past webinars. Maybe there is something in there, Lauren, that would be really interesting to you. But yes, I do a webinar every month with a different focus, and a lot of times it's based on business development. And some of this interview prep can really be adjacent to how you sell yourself as an entrepreneur to potential partners, to potential investors. So a lot of these things can be transferable to business owners as well. Danielle, no, you can schedule with me. It does not have to be just alumni. It can be current students, prospective students. I'm here to help everybody. So yeah. Lauren, health and wellness and postpartum care, that's so amazing. That's really needed. And I would love to chat with you sometime about that. Cool. Awesome. Well, stay connected. I'd love to help you in any way that I can. And I just really appreciate you all being here. And yeah, Lauren, feel free. Put an appointment on my calendar. I'd love to meet you if we haven't met already. Awesome. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.